Freddy Dodge's drill hit metal where there should have been stone. And that's when everything changed. What he and Juan Ibarra unearthed next wasn't a vein, it was a vault, sealed, welded, and forgotten for over a century. Beneath that ridge waited crates of pure gold worth over $85 million, tied to a smuggling ring the government erased from the record. Every layer they peeled back exposed another lie, a cover-up buried in steel and time. Smash that like button and subscribe, because this isn't just another gold rush find. It's the kind of discovery men have killed to keep hidden. The morning started like any other dig, cold breath hanging in the air, diesel rumble cutting through fog, until Freddy noticed the ground itself moving. Tiny sinkholes forming and closing like the earth was breathing. Juan crouched beside one, felt a faint pulse of air rising through the dirt. Warm, metallic, almost unnatural. Locals had mentioned this ridge before, a forgotten patch west of their claim. They called it the ridge that breathes. Most just avoided it. But to Freddy, that was a reason to go closer. He checked the topographic map, one of those yellowed, brittle sheets that still smelled of graphite and oil. The spot had a name once. Lone Star Number 7. Registered in 1903. Abandoned. But something didn't line up. The ridge didn't match the old contour lines, like the land itself had been rearranged. Juan unpacked a CO2 meter, half joking, half curious, and the readings jumped. Off the charts, the device whining as it maxed out. "That's not vent gas," he muttered. "That's sealed air pressure." Freddy's drill rig groaned to life, its bit punching through soft gravel, then clay. Then, suddenly, nothing. The bit dropped 20 feet straight into hollow space. Freddy killed the motor. Silence. Then a faint echo came back up the borehole, like breathing. They widened the test hole and lowered a drone cam. The feed flickered, then sharpened, revealing a shape that shouldn't have been there. A perfect rectangle buried under tons of soil, its walls gleaming faintly even through sediment. Metal. Real metal. Juan leaned in, staring at the screen. That's not natural rock. The structure was lined with riveted plates, like part of an old mine shaft, but sealed tight, its entrance choked with debris. Around the site, stones bore faint scorch marks. Someone had detonated charges long ago, powerful enough to fuse rock to steel. Freddy wiped sweat from his brow. This wasn't collapse, it was closure. He pulled up the old mining records from his laptop. Lone Star Mine, permanently closed. 3 fatalities, no reported yield. No gold, no recovery, just silence after the explosion. But the company's ledgers vanished that same year, right when the gold rush peaked. Freddy stared at the coordinates, then at the hollow beneath them. "They didn't seal it because of danger," he said quietly. "They sealed it because they didn't want anyone going back." By sundown, they'd traced an old trail leading to what used to be the mine foreman's shack. The structure leaned against the wind, half eaten by time, boards warped and riddled with moss. Inside, under a collapsed table and a rusted lantern, Freddy's boot hit something solid. A leather book, swollen with age, its cover scorched but intact. He turned the brittle pages carefully. Inside, sketches, cross-sections of tunnels, names, and one chilling note written in red pencil: "Vault secured. Do not return." The numbers in the book didn't make sense. Gold yields 10 times what was ever reported. Whole shipments unaccounted for, with initials matching missing freight manifests from the 1910s. Juan scanned the faded diagrams with his phone, layering them over modern maps, and his eyes widened. The tunnel system wasn't random. It formed a geometric pattern. One branch directly beneath the ridge they were standing on. A sealed shaft marked Access Tunnel West. Freddy stared at the page, then at Juan. "This wasn't just a mine," he said slowly. "It was a vault. A storage vault, disguised as a gold claim, sealed, buried, and erased from every map that followed. The air between them tightened as the weight of it sank in. Freddy folded the ledger shut, jaw set. "We're opening it." By dawn, the excavator's bucket was clawing into the ridge, tearing through decades of stone and silence. Each scoop brought up more of the same impossible metal, not corroded pipe or wire, but rusted steel beams arranged in a perfect grid, reinforced far beyond what any 1900s crew could have built. Freddy ran his hand along the edge. The steel wasn't brittle, it was dense, interlocked, and welded tight. Someone had gone to extreme lengths to keep whatever lay inside untouched. The oxygen meter Juan set down began to chirp, a sudden spike. "That's trapped air," he muttered. "It's still sealed tight." He crouched to inspect the faceplate, brushing away dirt until faint engravings emerged. A triangle surrounding two letters, DM. Freddy frowned. No company stamp, no miner's mark. This was personal. They moved slowly, cutting away debris, exposing what looked like a massive welded gate set into the mountain's core. The scorch marks along the seams told the story. Someone had detonated charges right at the mouth. The explosion hadn't collapsed the tunnel, it had welded it shut. "They didn't want anyone reopening this," Freddy said, pulling his mask into place. He fired up the plasma torch, the hiss echoing against the ridge walls. The first cut sent sparks dancing through the dusk, each slice revealing cleaner steel beneath the corrosion. The temperature spiked. Juan backed up, holding the torchline steady as Freddy worked the final seam. A deep groan shuddered through the ridge, then a sharp crack. The air that had been trapped for over 100 years exploded outward with a violent hiss, nearly knocking Freddy off his feet. Dust swirled up, carrying a stale metallic tang, like old machinery and forgotten earth. When the air cleared, a narrow opening yawned before them, a perfect square carved with precision. They crawled through, lights sweeping over a passage that looked nothing like a mine. The walls were lined with black quartz that shimmered faintly in the beam, laced with streaks of silver and reddish residue. Juan scraped a sample and frowned. "That's mercury and cyanide. Refining residue." Freddy shone his light further ahead. The tunnel stretched into darkness, too straight, too deliberate, every inch engineered. They followed it deeper, the air thick and cold. Then Juan's boot hit something solid protruding from the wall. A wooden crate half embedded in the sediment. The top was sealed with dark wax, the edges branded with the same triangle and letters mark. DM. Freddy pried it loose, set it on a flat rock, and cracked it open. Inside, everything was wrapped tight in oilcloth, brittle but intact. He peeled back the first layer and froze. It wasn't tools or ore samples. It was paperwork. Official assay reports, handwritten in ink that had barely faded. The numbers were impossible. Gold yields reading over 500 ounces per ton. Juan blinked at the figures. That can't be right. No mine on record ever hit those levels. Freddy turned the page and saw the date. June 1912. Each report was stamped refined, with initials matching those missing from the ledger they'd found earlier. His pulse quickened. These weren't test results, they were production logs, but the gold wasn't listed anywhere in company records because it had never gone through legal channels. He dug deeper through the box. Letters, transactions, shipping manifests. All unsigned, all coded. Then, buried under the last layer of cloth, Freddy found a small copper plate etched with a set of coordinates and a phrase, "Vault sealed after the fire." His eyes met Juan's. "This wasn't mining," he said. "This was laundering." The pieces began to connect. The Lone Star operation had been a front, a refinery, hidden beneath a legitimate claim. During the height of the Yukon and Klondike smuggling routes, gold was crossing from Canada into the U.S. under false manifests. Somewhere, powerful men needed a place to clean that gold, before it entered circulation. This mine, this sealed fortress, was their answer. The Lone Star Company had never really collapsed. It had disappeared, leaving behind a sealed vault no one dared to open. As they mapped the tunnel, Juan noticed thin, corroded shafts branching off the main drift. They weren't mining extensions, they were ventilation lines, angled downward, running all the way toward the riverbed below. Perfect for siphoning air or smuggling something heavy through the water without leaving a trail. Freddy followed one of the vents until the passage curved abruptly and ended in another welded plate. The metal bore the same triangular emblem. Beneath it, a faint, almost erased inscription read, Vault 2. Freddy brushed the dirt away, the letters surfacing in the beam of his headlamp. Vault sealed after the fire, he whispered, remembering the note. The first chamber they'd opened was only the beginning. A decoy, maybe even a refinery. But the second vault, that was where they'd hidden the real treasure. Hours later, back at camp, the evidence still gnawed at them. Juan spread the old ledger across the hood of the truck, halogen light cutting through the dark. The pages were stiff, corners blackened from age, but something about the ink shimmered faintly. Under normal light, it looked blank between the lines. Under the UV lamp, hidden script began to surface. Faint blue annotations no one had seen in a century. Coordinates, symbols, tunnels, depths. Then a single mark glowed brighter than the rest. A star beside the words, Vault 2, unclaimed. Freddy leaned in, tracing the pattern. The numbers placed it 200 meters west, outside their claim line, on inactive terrain. But the geometry was too precise to be coincidence. He uploaded the coordinates to the drone system and sent it overhead. The live LiDAR scan rendered the terrain in ghostly blue. Most of the ridge was solid, dense, except one perfect circle about 50 meters wide. It looked natural at first, like a small sink basin, but the density readings were off. Underneath, a hollow pocket cut clean into the bedrock. That's not erosion, Juan said. Freddy stared at the hollow outline. That's man-made. They marked the spot and drove the rig across rough ground until they reached it, a dip covered in brittle shrubs and gravel. Freddy jumped out, boot sinking slightly into soft soil. He crouched, listening. The ground had a faint resonance when struck, a dull ring. "There's something down there," he muttered. They drilled the first borehole at dawn. The bit chewed through layers of clay, shale, and then suddenly broke into open space. The depth monitor froze. 40 feet. Hollow cavity confirmed. Freddy fed the borehole camera down through the tubing, watching the screen flicker as it descended into murky water. A faint glimmer appeared in the dark. Not reflection, not mineral shimmer, but something with shape. Straight lines, angles. He froze the frame. A metallic edge, rectangular, buried under silt. Juan adjusted the feed focus. The object filled the screen. A submerged structure, box-like, with riveted corners. Juan dropped a probe line into the borehole. The sensor pinged repeatedly. "That's gold trace in the water," he said, eyes wide. "Tiny particles." Dissolved metal, Freddy knew what that meant. There was unrefined ore, or worse, oxidized bullion, somewhere inside. The water wasn't natural. Someone had flooded the chamber intentionally, not to preserve it, but to hide it. "They turned it into a tomb," Freddy whispered. "No oxygen, no evidence, no witnesses." They rigged a pump system and began draining, knowing full well the risk. One wrong shift in pressure, and the chamber could collapse. The first day, the pumps gurgled and sputtered against the weight of decades. The outflow was black, thick with sediment, smelling faintly of fuel and metal. By nightfall of the second day, the water had dropped 10 feet, revealing the curved top of something massive beneath the surface. The drone's thermal readouts registered a cold void, a sealed cavity behind thick iron. By the end of 48 hours, The last of the muddy water drained into containment trenches. The pumps went silent. What lay before them looked like the buried front of a fortress. A massive iron gate jutted from the earth, its surface etched with corrosion and streaked gold that caught the floodlights. Freddy wiped at one section with his glove, and the mark beneath gleamed faintly. The same triangle and letters DM, but this time outlined in gold leaf. Juan exhaled. They marked it like a signature. They moved fast, setting up hydraulic cutters along the hinges. The metal fought back, creaking with every slice. The sound echoed through the valley like low thunder. When the final cut went through, the entire structure gave a deep groan, hinges snapping apart with a sound like breaking bone. Cold air spilled out, heavy, stale, laced with the scent of oil and dust. Freddy stepped inside, light sweeping across rows of identical steel crates stacked waist-high in the chamber. Everyone was sealed, waxed, and branded with the same C-17 stamp from before. He pried one open. Inside lay perfectly shaped gold bars, each wrapped in cloth so fine it disintegrated at his touch. The bars glowed faintly under the work lights, not polished, but pure. Their edges bore serial numbers from the early 1900s, each stamped refined and tagged with the mark of the Lone Star Company. Juan counted quickly. Dozens of crates visible, possibly hundreds deeper in. Freddy lifted one bar. It was dense, almost too heavy for its size, the surface untouched by time. He turned it in his hand, the reflection dancing across the walls. Every assumption they'd made about Lone Star Mine, the sealed tunnel, the refinery, the ledger, all of it led here. Not a myth, not a prospector's tale. A sealed gold reserve, hidden beneath a false claim, left untouched for over a century. The way the chamber was built, with its reinforced gates and flood design, meant it wasn't just for storage. It was meant to be permanent. Freddy ran his hand along the crate, brushing away the wax seal, revealing faint stenciled lettering beneath the grime. U.S. Consignment. Unlisted. He stared in silence. If the reports in the C-17 crate had been real, this wasn't just $85 million in old bullion. It was the missing gold from the 1914 transport logs. Stolen, rerouted, and buried under Lone Star Ridge. Juan stood at the threshold of the vault, beam trembling across the dark expanse of gold-lined steel. "Freddy," he said quietly, "we just opened the wrong door." Freddy stepped forward without answering, his boots scraping against the metal floor. He reached into the nearest crate and heaved out a bar with both hands. It was warm from the lamp, dense and impossibly clean. 22 pounds of near-pure gold. The stamped numbers glinted in the light, matching the 1914 manifest codes. Juan scanned the rest. 19 rows, 10 crates per row, all identical. His voice dropped to a whisper. "That's $85 million. Freddy leaned against the wall, staring out over the gleaming stacks. The chamber seemed to breathe with them. Silent, heavy, aware. As if it had been waiting for someone to finally understand what it truly was. They dug through the remaining documents packed among the crates, faded manifests, coded letters, and routing tags burned into tin plates. The origin points all traced northward, through ghost mining towns that hadn't existed on modern maps for decades. But the destination seals were unmistakable. Reserve allocation, Federal Transit, 1914. Wartime shipments, the missing consignment that had vanished on paper without a single trace. Freddy set the papers down, his hands shaking. Every legend about smuggled Yukon gold, every whisper about stolen government bullion, all of it was here, sealed beneath the ridge. One sheet, laminated in wax, and stamped with the initials DM, listed 5 signatures. Each name matched the ledger they'd found in the shack. But 2 of the names were also on Federal Archive lists. Men reported dead in a transport fire near Whitehorse that same year. Their supposed deaths had wiped the records clean. Freddy stared at the page, feeling the weight of what they'd uncovered. It wasn't just a discovery. It was evidence of a cover-up buried so deep it had become a ghost story. He set the gold bar back in the crate carefully. "This was never meant to be found," he said. Juan filmed the entire vault, panning across each crate, each serial number, each carved marking. He focused on the phrase etched near the base of the main gate. "Property secured by Dominion Metals, 1914. Dominion Metals, the same letters they'd seen carved into the steel earlier. DM. It wasn't a person's initials. It was a company, one that had quietly vanished after the war, its assets absorbed into unnamed holding firms. Freddy looked at the gate's thick welds, realizing it wasn't just sealed to hide gold. It was sealed to bury the scandal tied to it. As the hours passed, the temperature dropped. The wind outside howled against the equipment. Freddy and Juan began cataloging crates, stacking the documentation, photographing every inch. Then, faintly, over the sound of the pump generators, came a noise, steady, rhythmic, out of sync with their work. Footsteps, not echo from their own boots. Above them, faint vibrations rippled through the ground. Freddy killed the lights. Silence fell heavy. The sound grew clearer. Slow, deliberate steps across gravel. Then the grind of a handbrake being set. Juan crept toward the tunnel entrance, peering through the narrow cut they'd made. Outside, two beams of light pierced the night. Truck headlights, idling at the ridge. The vehicle wasn't theirs. The profile was heavier, military grade. Someone else was out there. Freddy reached for the remote feed on the monitor. Static. The cameras were offline. "They're jamming our signal," Juan said, watching the GPS blink red. Freddy's chest tightened. It wasn't random. Someone knew exactly where they were. Without a word, Freddy grabbed the documents and stuffed them into a waterproof case. He closed the crate lid and began resealing the vault. The air compressor hissed, driving the locking pins back into place. The floodgate they'd cut open clanged shut, heavy enough to shake the walls. Juan helped him replace the surface debris, throwing canvas over the entry frame. The hum of the idling truck continued above them, unmoving. They waited, barely breathing, as boots crunched near the borehole site. The sound lingered for minutes that felt like hours, then faded into the wind. When they finally stepped outside, the truck was gone. But fresh tire tracks wound down the hill, leading toward the main road. Freddy stared after them, jaw tight. "They were watching," he said. Neither spoke on the drive back to camp. The truck's headlights cut across the valley, glinting off wet rock where the pumps had drained the last of the chamber's water. Every noise seemed sharper now. The echo of loose gravel, the whisper of diesel engines far off. At the trailer, Juan immediately encrypted all footage and logs, burying them under double firewalls and blank metadata. "No cloud uploads," Freddy said. "Keep it local, nothing traceable." Juan nodded, already setting the files into a partitioned drive. The ledger, the only physical record, was sealed inside a waterproof container and buried beneath the floorboards of their rig. By dawn, the site was quiet again. The wind had erased the tracks leading up the ridge. The borehole cap was welded shut, the pumps dismantled. No sign remained of what they'd uncovered, except a few stray weld marks on iron buried under gravel. Freddy wrote a single note in his logbook. No claim filings, no coordinates, no details. Just vault confirmed. Contents secured. It wasn't greed or fear holding him back. It was instinct. Too many coincidences, too many dead names tied to the same gold. They left the ridge as the first light broke, the sun spilling over the horizon and catching faint gold hues in the distant rock face. The mine looked ordinary again. Just another forgotten claim lost to time. Juan stayed silent, watching the landscape disappear in the mirror. He knew that somewhere beneath those hills lay a sealed fortune that could rewrite history, and a secret dangerous enough to erase anyone who got too close. That night, at the base camp, Juan backed up the encrypted footage twice, one copy stored in a locked case under his bunk, the other on a drive labeled only with a date. Freddy sat outside the trailer, eyes on the ridge, the wind carrying that same low hum from the borehole vents. "If that truck comes back," Juan said from the doorway, "what do we do?" Freddy didn't look away. "Nothing. We were never here." Days later, a new crew appeared on the far side of the valley. Heavy equipment, survey markers, plain trucks without company logos. They never approached Freddy's site, but their presence said enough. The ridge wasn't forgotten anymore. Someone else had picked up the signal. Freddy and Juan packed quietly, erasing GPS trails, wiping the drone data. When they drove off that morning, no one waved and no one followed. The ridge shrank in the rearview mirror until it was just another rise of Earth. Ordinary, anonymous, hiding an empire under its skin. Weeks later, Juan received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single Polaroid. A close-up of the ridge, freshly fenced off, with a warning sign posted where their access road used to be. Private property. Environmental survey ongoing. Scrawled beneath it in ink was a simple message. "Leave it buried." Juan showed it to Freddy, who stared for a long time before folding the photo in half. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. They both knew the message wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. The gold was real, the records undeniable, but what surrounded it was larger than treasure, larger than discovery. Freddy placed the folded photo beside the ledger in the locked case and sealed it away for good. Months later, during another dig hundreds of miles north, Freddy caught the same faint metallic smell in the air, the scent of sealed tunnels and long-buried secrets. He stopped the excavator, staring at the horizon. The earth always hides what it can't explain. The ridge had given them its secret once, and that was enough. Some gold, he realized, wasn't meant to be found twice.